Hello and welcome to this special discussion with Ruchir Sharma, noted author and global investor. Now, we are here to discuss Ruchir's latest book. It is called Democracy on the Road, a 25-year journey through India. Now, here's the book which was released some time ago, and now this is about, although Ruchir is a global investor, he is passionate about politics. And he's also passionate about Indian politics, Indian elections, and this book is a result of Ruchir's exploration of, I would say, 27 odd elections through 20 years, and he has been traveling through India, observing various elections, writing about Indian politics, and we are here to discuss this journey that he has been through with a group of, well, a motley group of journalists, psephologists, analysts, etc. And here's a disclosure, I have also been part of this group which has traveled with him. So, welcome to this show, Ruchir, and so tell us, what has been your key learning in regard to India in 20 years, 27 elections, you've done so many, been through so many general elections, state elections. So, what is it that strikes you about India, which is say different from, the politics that you see in other emerging markets? Now, I'm asking you this because you also study other emerging markets where you invest. So,
one of the things I must say though, like on a slightly different point, is the fact that we have done these trips now, and one alternative title I could have given this is a safe passage of India, which is that we have travelled on, and I don't think that we have ever felt unsafe travelling into these interior parts of India, bar maybe a couple of trips like Lalgarh in West Bengal, the Naxal infested area back in May of 2011, maybe parts of Bihar when we went to North Bihar in November 2005, and that for me tells you a lot about both this country, its politics compared to other countries, because I cannot imagine doing a trip like this in a Brazil or South Africa, because the crime situation, the class warfare, and in general how insecure the rich feel outside their gated communities is quite something. And here we are.
Would you include Russia also there?
Well, Russia doesn't even have a proper democracy, but yeah, with this travel that we have done through all these countries compared to India, I'd say really reveals that to me. Like about the fact that at some level, despite all the talk about violence and all these incidents which get played up a lot, at some level the warmth and the hospitality of India, I think, overrides those factors.
And you would give the Indian people credit for that,
Oh,
right?
totally, exactly. I mean, in terms of just how hospitable they are. As you know, that when we go to these, that to anyone's home that we go to, it's a very casual atmosphere, but yet the food is served out all the time, in terms of they all want to feed you well. That's their code of love for you. So I think that is
you're offered tea wherever you go,
biscuits, tea, even any election rally you go. Now it's partly, I think, that, like, to be fair, that there is this slight class division here, that if you're perceived as Angrezi Patrakar, then you get a bit of a better treatment, and the red plastic chairs come out for you, and they'll give you the water and the biscuits and stuff. But in general, the warmth and the hospitality is a common thread which I try to bring in the book, apart from obviously the politics of the book. So I'd say that that's one big qualitative difference between many other
so you feel much safer traveling through India covering elections, which may not be the case in other countries.
Yeah, I feel much safer traveling through India, period, compared to other countries, especially from a crime situation, and the warmth and hospitality extended to you, which sort of makes up for that. Even if the roads are a bit of a nightmare and the traffic is a bit of a nightmare, but I think that for me is one of the most endearing parts of the trips.
Tell me, Ruchir, you've been covering elections or observing Indian elections for now more than 20 years. Now, in the process, you've also seen what we describe as the development process in India. Now, you've traveled through broken roads, almost like moonscape, whether it's Bihar, UP, especially the more underdeveloped states, and then you've also seen elections where Bijli Sadak Pani kind of ceased to become such a big issue because it was already factored, it was provided.
Right.
So given this journey and given that you've seen these markers through 20 years, what would you regard as the big issues today facing Indian polity and the say 2019 elections? Is development the big issue, or are identity issues coming to the fore, or what issues do you think will play a role in the coming elections?
No, but I think that in this regard, I have to go back to a comment that was made to us by this local politician in Karnataka called UT Khadir, and he made a very insightful point. He said fighting Indian elections is like taking a series of exams, and you need a minimum passing score of 35% on each. And he said, like roughly 6 exams you have to take and get a minimum passing score of 35% on each. And that was insightful in a way that even though he did not spell out what those 6 factors should be, what he was really suggesting was the fact that you cannot fight an election in India based on one factor. So development may be one of the 6 factors, but to fight an election just based on the development work that you have done is extremely difficult, like in India. And that's something we see even in Bihar, that possibly the most transformed state that we have seen in all our travels has been Bihar. That between our first trip in 2005 to the last time we went there for the assembly elections in November of 2015, the transformation in Bihar has been quite dramatic. And yet Nitish Kumar cannot win an election based on just development. His vote share never seems to break above 20%, given the fact that he comes from a caste of Kurmis, which is just 3 to 4% of the Bihar population. So I think that the point here is that development may matter, but it is one of maybe 6 factors which matter. And the other factors that you have to look at, as you well know, that you have to start with caste and religion. Until you get that mix right in any constituency, there's no point in even putting up a candidate. Then you got to, there are other factors like whether it's got to do with what's happening to inflation, what's happening to unemployment.
Economics, yeah.
Yeah, some economic factors, as you're saying. And then things like corruption, that, that's a factor. Then even family connections tend to matter. I mean, India is a very fertile ground for diners to do well. Yeah. So family connections tend to matter. Then how much money you're spending on that election, what is your sort of money spending power. So it's this combination of 6 or so factors, let's say, at any point in time, which is what determines an Indian election.
So do you think there's a term which analysts often use, which is they call it the revolt of rising aspiration. So even if you deliver some development, it's not good enough for the people.
Yeah, that's partly true, but as I said, that there are 2 ways of seeing it. That one that
like Bijli Sadak Pani, for instance, I'm just posing this to you. In 20 years, at least for 10 years, you would have seen Bijli Sadak Pani being the key issue, one of the key issues, right? Now, have people, at some point people take it for granted, right? Bijli Sadak Pani is something you in any case you're meant to provide. So you don't get any marks for this. So and then they go back to identity. Is that?
No, I don't think they go back to identity. I think the fact is that people begin to realize that you need to do much more in terms of what you deliver. And these slogans, everything has a sell by date. Yeah. So like in Bihar in 2015 when we went and we saw Modi's rally near Patna, he was speaking much more now about like different things, in terms of like education and padai, dawai, like he's coming out with different slogans about like in terms of how do you
basically he articulated development in his own unique way.
Yeah, in terms of looking at different factors, moving beyond Bijli Sadak Pani, talking about padai, dawai kind of factors out there. So I think that's how things evolve. But the point I'm making is this, that just fighting an election on the basis of development, even if you move to higher goals rather than just doing basics of Bijli Sadak Pani, is very difficult in India.
Very difficult.
Yeah, that like it's just very difficult to win an election based on development in India. This is not the connection between politics and economics in India is rather weak compared to, let's say, many Western democracies such as America.
Okay, yeah. I've read that, Ruchir. You one of your key theories is this, that the connection between politics and economics in India is rather weak compared to some of the Western democracies. Now, let me sort of challenge you on this. Let me push you a little more on this. Now, do you think this connection is weak because India is a low per capita income country, and people still, as you rightly say in the book, that the state is so broken that people are never satisfied with what the state provides to the citizens, and the citizens interface with the government. The experience is really bad, which you also mentioned in regard to Bijnor, where you went recently, right? So, do you think as India's per capita income goes up and we become truly a middle income country, we are still a low middle income country with whatever $1,800 per capita, then the connection between economics and politics will become more stable?
No, I think that
and caste based voting will go down, because some analysts say that there are already some signs of caste based voting somewhat waning. While it is still very strong, it's waning, which is why Narendra Modi, with 31% vote share, managed to sort of get so many seats. Probably he got people from various castes voting for him. Would you say that?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I mean, in terms of, I think that I'll make two sort of slightly different points here in this connection. One is the fact that I don't think it's got to do with just low per capita income, but it's got to do with the other fact that the state is broken. So the state's capacity to deliver is so weak that like you keep announcing one scheme after another scheme without quite sort of knowing which of these schemes has worked.
But isn't that linked to low GDP, low per capita income?
It's a bit of a chicken egg story, which is.
No, I'll give you one example. Modi, for instance, the current elections that Modi is fighting, all his flagship schemes, they are really grand in their conception, like healthcare for for 50 crore people, nearly half of India's population, free, I mean through insurance, then housing for whatever, housing for all, poor, low cost housing for all. And each one of his schemes is big in its conception, but underfunded. Now, if you remember through some of our journeys in the last 20 years, once Digvijay Singh told us that he was chief minister in Madhya Pradesh when India's tax revenues were very poor. The big growth India saw was between 2004 and 2010, and Digvijay Singh's argument was that chief ministers during that period, they benefited from transfer of higher tax revenues from the center, and they were the ones who built sadak, bijli, and they improved the bijli, sadak, pani, the basic infrastructure, and they kept getting re-elected, and that finds mention in your book also. That how anti-incumbency got broken, somewhat.
Between 2004 and 2010.
Yeah, can you tell us something about that?
Yeah, so between 2004 like 2010, we had the lowest rate of anti-incumbency ever since India became a multi-party democracy. Those 5 to 6 years, if you take the sort of rolling average, that's when it was low, and it's exactly because we, I think, enjoyed this very fortuitous set of circumstances, which is that you ended up having a very high economic growth rate because the global economy was doing so well. Very low inflation. I think people sort of forget that was also a period of very low inflation.
2004 2010.
Yeah.
Inflation actually started picking up after 11.
Exactly. I mean from 10 onwards. So but those years were very low inflation, and because of this combination of very high economic growth and low inflation, you had a massive transfer to the states, because that's how India's sort of finances are structured, and they were able to spend a lot on welfareism. So even in states like Madhya Pradesh and all, which we credit so much for being these high economic growth stories, the amount of welfare schemes that Shivraj Chauhan was able to launch in that period of time, and this is true for many of the states, was incredible, because they just got such a big revenue windfall. Even the UPA, which had a sort of bit of a spendthrift type of mindset, even they couldn't quite keep pace with the massive revenue windfall which was coming in. So I think that is really how, that's what really led to this thing being, possibly because leading to anti-incumbency being broken. But that I think was a very special circumstance, and given today where the external environment is much less conducive, I think it's very difficult to return to that kind of circumstance. But the fundamental reform which hasn't been carried out like in this country has to do with the state's capacity to deliver. It's still very weak. Even in our travels, we went recently to places like Madhya Pradesh and Rajasthan. You get to hear about all these sort of incidents that you can set a minimum support price. But when you try and, when the farmer tries to get that minimum support price from the FCI, he's given the complete runaround. So he has to go and sell everything out in the open market.
Or even some other welfare schemes, flagship schemes of this government, like the free gas connections and electricity and what have you. There is people do complain that some people have got it, the others haven't. So there's some anger among others who haven't got it.
Yeah, even to do with ODF. In terms of what happened with that. So I think that there's a constant. That's the problem as far as this.
So that means, can I then? Are you arguing then that until India improves its the capacity of its states to deliver these basic social and physical infrastructure to the people, the link between
economics and politics will remain quite weak.
Yeah. So
exactly.
So for this link to strengthen, the state has to improve its capacity first, right?
Absolutely. And this exactly. So I think that's what I'd go to, because to me I found this really amazing.
And is that why in your book, in the last chapter, you say that no party in India, whatever it may proclaim its ideology to be, can move away from, when it comes to brass tacks, state socialism?
No, I think that's just the DNA, but I'm not sure that really works also, because I found this data very sort of amazing, if I may say so, which is the fact that that the center still does not know how many schemes it actually has out there. And so they were doing an audit, and the number of centrally sponsored schemes, whether it's direct or assisted, is more than 1,000, and they're still counting. So this entire, they come up with one scheme after another scheme after another scheme, but you also end up leading to massive disappointment when the scheme doesn't deliver.
Yeah, so Ruchir, that's precisely what I'm trying to get at. What I'm saying is, just extending your argument that you make in the book, until the state really improves its capacity and starts delivering on these schemes, the discourse will never move to, let's say, the role of the markets.
Right.
At the moment, again I come back to the argument about middle income and rich countries. It's because in the middle income, high middle income and rich countries, the state has achieved a certain capacity to deliver on basics, that the discourse then moves to other things.
That's right. That's right. So, but this is a lesson I think that even here we have to.
So here, since they don't, they've not been able to deliver, so they have to necessarily keep talking about delivering instead of actually delivering. Isn't that what is happening?
Yeah. And I think this is what I find really amazing, that we keep announcing these schemes but never see what exactly that they're delivering on. And you speak to many bureaucrats and they'll tell you this, that at a local level for a district magistrate, if you were to have just very few schemes, at least he or she could try to deliver on them. But when they're overwhelmed with these 200-300 schemes at any point in time that they're trying to administer, it just leads to disappointments. And you brought about Kamal Nath's name earlier, and
Digvijay Singh and
of the Madhya Pradesh. But Kamal Nath also made a very interesting comment when we met him in Madhya Pradesh in November of last year, and he basically said that when you announce a scheme for a particular constituency, you end up antagonizing everybody else who feels they've been left out with that constituency.
Absolutely.
So he said, if you have to announce a scheme, then you do it for everybody. But this targeted, which we think is helping, so the typical Indian reactive way that we think a particular constituency is aggrieved, so we'll announce a scheme to help that constituency. How much the constituency benefits from that scheme, we don't know, because some people don't get the benefits. But more than that, the people who are not targeted begin to feel that, hey, we didn't get any benefit from this. So I think that this is the constant struggle in this country.
The point you're making is also reflected in the fact that that most of these schemes, as Kamal Nath was saying, or as Digvijay was telling us when we visited Madhya Pradesh, there is a need for universalization of some of these schemes, because the moment you start targeting the people who don't get it, they start complaining. And as per the socio-economic and caste survey done by the center, by the government, it clearly shows, and even NSS data clearly shows that 90% of Indian households are ones where the earning member, the primary earning member, gets 10,000 rupees or less a month. So if that being the case, assuming the second member also earns about 3,000-4,000,
right,
15,000 rupees a month for a family of 5, would obviously claim its entitlement to all these schemes, because that's not good enough. So if 90% of the households are in this situation, so what does the state do? So will the state, so doesn't it, isn't it sort of mandatory now for the state to provide?
In theory, yes, but in practice, what happens?
Basics. I'm not talking about
exactly, but you know, like in theory, yes, but in practice, I don't know what do you do when the state just can't seem to deliver.
But Western democracies have gone through this stage, right? They have provided basic education, basic.
Yeah, but having said that, you know, like I think Venu, like I make this point about the distinction between China and India, and you can argue that, you know, whatever, which is better or not. In China, they did not provide any of this. In terms of the basic support, I mean, they had no real welfare state.
But did China do it on literacy? They did very well, isn't it?
They spent a lot on stuff that they thought was going to lead to long-term growth. Whether it's a lot of roads, bridges, infrastructure, even on like education and stuff. But they did not do much to help the farmers in terms of this entire culture of farm loan waivers and other things. That China just did not do.
Yeah, they destroyed through collective farming, they destroyed the entrepreneurial farmer actually.
But you know, but my entire point is this, that there's only that much money you have. In theory, we'd like to give everything to everybody. There's only that much money you have, and what you prioritize on something really matters for your long-term growth prospects. So in China, they prioritized a lot of hard infrastructure and did not do much of welfare state in the initial stages of their reform process, and therefore you got a very high growth rate boosted by massive productivity. In India's case, whether it's a reality that you can argue of the democracy or the way the Indian DNA is, but here we have done a lot on the welfare side without having built the other infrastructure first. So I think that for me is the big difference between India and China.
Okay. Anyway, since China is not a democracy, it's difficult to assess the impact of what the state has done on, say, in elections, because China doesn't have elections.
That's right. But I think
what's it? Give us a more like-to-like comparison between. I noticed that in some of your previous books, I think Breakout Nations or I think Rise and Fall of Nations.
Yes.
You likened India more to, say, Brazil.
Yeah.
Yeah. In terms
culturally,
culturally, and I thought you were suggesting that India and Brazil are similar in one way. There's pressure on doing welfare programs ahead of growth producing enough revenues. It's much more in these two countries, isn't it?
Yes, that's true. But Brazil now is going the other way. It's done so much of that it's now facing a fiscal time bomb. Okay. So there now the entire effort of the new administration which has come to power there is how do you roll this back. Okay. So I think that there's a very it's very interesting that Brazil now is trying to correct for the excesses caused by too much of spending. But I want to go back again to one of the themes in the book which I've spoken about, which is that the development model in India, given the fact that this is a continent-sized economy, and given the heterogeneity and diversity and how, even at a cultural aspect, the states are so different from each other, that it really now is all about the fact that if you want growth in India, it has to come by different states.
And which has been your theme, Ruchir, even in your writings, not just this book. You have been maintaining from the very beginning that Indian politics or Indian, it's an aggregation of
29 states.
29 states,
yes.
Regional politics coming together.
That's right.
So in a sense, you are also suggesting that it's a bit of a myth that India can be ruled by a strong center, by just one party or one strong leader, given its diversity. And of course 2014 we had after a long time we had a single party getting a majority in parliament. But do you feel we are back moving towards a coalition kind of situation?
Well, I think that that even if you go back to the 2014 election, you spoke about the BJP getting 31% of the vote share, but what was the most telling statistic in that election was the fact that its seats it got was disproportionately high for the votes it got. And what they told you was the fact that the reason why that happened was because the opposition was so badly divided, like fragmented back then. So I think that the coalition culture has always been there as far as India is concerned. But this arithmetic may make a difference in terms of what the outcome is. But I think we possibly are now moving back to a situation where if the opposition seems to be regrouping.
If it is not so fragmented, so you're saying on the same percentage of vote, BJP may get less seats.
Exactly. I think that is what the real lesson of 2014 was, which many of the opposition seems to have learnt.
You've run through the last 20 years so many states, and you're right, India is a continent-sized country, and the south is so different from the north, the east is so different from the south. Tell us something about your insights, your observations about these cultural differences and how politics in these places are different.
No, I think that
they fought differently.
Yeah, totally. Like South India, it's just totally different. Like Tamil Nadu, when we go, they don't care who Modi or Rahul is. In terms of them, for them, it's like literally Modi who, Rahul who. It's like all about the local stuff, and they don't like too much Hindi being spoken or that sort of latent anti-Hindi sentiment still very much exists out there. And I think that this is one of the big problems I feel of the coverage, even out of Delhi and stuff, that we tend to miss out on the south and what exactly it's saying. Because even when we went to Karnataka last year, at the dinner, I remember at Nandan Nilekani's place, there was so much of this palpable feeling of too much North Indian type of domination, and I still remember
there is an undercurrent of
that even Ramachandran Guha sort of like in a slightly lighter moment standing up and saying that wish at some point in time there was a more independent South India. Just sort of feeling that there's too much of this North Indian imposition.
He said it in a lighter way.
Right.
Ram Guha said it.
Exactly. So I think that for me that's what tells you that the South India is like a very different India, and even within South India, the states don't exactly get along with each other. Like there's so much rivalry between some of these states, and even tensions, as you well know, between Karnataka and Tamil Nadu and things. So for me, that's really what India is about. It's state by state in terms of or
between Andhra and Telangana at present.
Exactly, or between Andhra and Telangana. So South India feels very differently on many issues, but the South India itself can never regroup as an independent South India because of the fact that two states in South India often don't see eye to eye on many issues.
But do you feel that since South India, by and large, South India is far more developed than the North Indian states, the Hindi heartland, right?
That used to be the case, but
no, let me come here with it. Even World Bank's studies show that the demographic profile of South India is in terms of the ratio of the aged and
like Kerala and
they are closer to some of the developed countries.
Right.
So they are on the base is much higher. So do you think their elections are fought more around the link between the politics and development?
Absolutely not. So I mean that's like such a good example that you brought out. Look at Tamil Nadu. That one of the big exactly like in terms of, and their welfareism and populism still works a lot. Every party there sort of engages in this competitive welfareism,
but the state capacity they are much better than North India.
Yeah, but I think that in terms of 2016 for me was still a very telling election, because 2016 for the first time in many years Tamil Nadu was able to break the curse of anti-incumbency and Jayalalitha got re-elected. But the economic performance of Tamil Nadu in those 5 years was one of the worst in its
you're right, even in Kerala, anti-incumbency has not been broken.
Exactly, for decades now.
Yeah, although on various indices they're much better than. So I guess that would you conclude that the state capacity still has to reach that critical point after which, beyond which, anti-incumbency can get sort of neutralized.
Yeah, I think that's the case. Like in
and look at Telangana.
Yeah.
The kind of schemes that they are coming up with. Now the center is trying to, the direct farmer transfer, income transfer to farmers.
Yeah.
The 2 rupee rice, all the big welfare schemes actually emerged from the south, and they were kind of emulated or copied by the either by the center or by the northern states.
Yeah, so this happens. Like even in Bihar, when he came up with this thing about giving free bicycles to girls to ride to school and things like that, that gets emulated. So again, that I think brings me back to the conclusion of the book, that this is a story of many Indias. Yeah. It's about the different states, and the heterogeneity and the diversity of the country is such that the best economic growth outcomes will happen on a state by state basis.
Absolutely.
But to have a national narrative around this, or to do something very strong nationally, is going to be very difficult as far as India is concerned.
So again, we come back to the same conclusion, that Indian politics or Indian elections are an aggregate of state elections. In a sense, what the states want, the state voters want for themselves.
So I think there's too much of a tendency in places like Delhi, Bombay to think of India still very much nationally and in presidential terms, Modi versus X and stuff like that. I feel that most voters in the country don't think that way. They're still voting in terms of what they feel as their regional leaders, what they feel as their, even when it comes to national elections, as what their own concerns are, rather than engaging in these very cosmic thoughts of who's going to be our next prime minister. That's one or two steps too removed.
I guess this change has especially come in the last, say, 20-30 years, because probably during Jawaharlal Nehru's time or even Indira Gandhi's time,
India wasn't a true multi-party democracy back then. So that's like
this phenomenon has kind of taken roots in the last 20 years.
Yeah, I mean, in 30-40 years with the rise of so many regional leaders, and India has become a true multi-party democracy because the first 20-30 years the Congress enjoyed a liberation dividend.
And you think it's going to stay that way for the next foreseeable future, next 10 years or so?
Yeah, but I think like this election coming up is going to all be about coalition politics.
Thank you very much, Ruchir, for talking to us.
To receive instant updates on all videos from The Wire, click the subscribe button and hit the bell icon. Pay to support independent journalism. Click the link in the description and choose the amount you want to pay.